This is episode 123, where you'll be meeting the multi-passionate and talented Carly Nimmo, who has a voiceover agency, runs Radcasters podcasting school, is the host of Carlosophies and Rock Your Mic Right, and also delivers fabulous coaching, retreats, workshops, and anything else she feels called to create. Building a business and life that blends contribution, fulfillment, and financial reward? Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the show for women in their 40s and beyond who are on this adventure. I'm Angela Rasmus, and I'm delighted you're here. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast in this very special series, which I've named Under the Radar, Ordinary Women Doing Extraordinary Things. Now, this is in celebration of my book, Your Next Chapter, Ditch Your Doubt, Own Your Worth, and Build the Business You Really Want. And it's all about having conversations with an amazingly entertaining array of women who are approaching their next chapters, handling their next chapters, throwing next chapters out, just basically all the different ways in which we're approaching the opportunities that are in our life. And I knew that Carly Nimmo simply had to be on this series. Carly is an absolute magician when it comes to stepping into new things. In fact, when we were looking at the story that is published on my website about Carly, part of what she was telling us was that starting's easy. It's actually ending, letting go and moving on, which is the trickier part. And so it's really interesting to hear that perspective and to dive into it a little bit more deeply as we hear about all the adventures in Miss Carly's life. So Carly, thank you so much for spending your time here with us today.
My pleasure. I'm excited.
We were having a little bit of a debrief before we hit record, and having a laugh at the fact that these sort of conversations for both of us are unedited. They are, to use your expression, very much a free flow. Is that fair to say?
Totally. I don't know how to do it other than that. You know, it ends up being really unnatural, and I find people don't connect with it when I'm rehearsed. So on the fly it is.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think I described you as the ultimate WYSIWYG. Who you see is who you get, as opposed to the what.
Well, I hope so. I don't know about how the school mums would feel about that, but but yes, most of the time. I am a little introverted though, so like if you haven't met me, then I can be the person kind of standing on the sidelines until we start talking, and then I'm me wherever I am.
Yeah, I think that's really the essence to me. One of the most important parts of embarking on a next chapter, of fully expanding to your own edges, is turning up fully as you, is actually recognizing, hey, this doesn't work anymore. This is who I am. I'm not going to cloak myself. I'm going to give, full permission to those desires, whatever they may be, to be unleashed. So talk to us a little bit about where you've come from and what you're doing now, and then we'll start unpacking all the bits and pieces in between.
Cool. So it's such a big story. I feel like, I've been in business now for 15 years by myself, but I've always been an entrepreneur of sorts. So even as a kid, I was the typical kid who'd have yard sales to raise money for charity, sell lemons door to door when my nana's tree was full, make my cousins draw postcards when we'd be on holidays at Phillip Island, and we'd sell them again, like to all the neighbours. So it was all, and I was the person who would have parties and like send out a run sheet for my party. It's so bizarre. So like I was a bit of a strange kid, and I was always, trying to get out of class to like see if I could teach the preps dance or put on a concert or something like that. So I've always been I've always had a love of, being on stage and being seen. And, and then I went to uni, studied arts. It didn't really get me anywhere except like I got a lot of ground skills, I guess, in TV and radio and all that kind of jazz. And I went into sales, even though my heart was calling me to radio. I thought photography and sales would be an easier path. So I did that for a few years. And it gave me a really good solid base in what it takes to be a good salesperson, really, which I rarely use because it's a lot of manipulation involved. And then I kind of went out and ended up, after working in photographics for a few years and finding myself at kind of the top echelon of where, like I basically was 24, looking around me with a bunch of middle-aged white men, and it was like, well, this is the pinnacle of my career. All I can go from here is national sales manager. Do I really want my life to look like this? And it was like, nah. So I went and worked in radio. And that is where, I got my footing in, and my love for, all things audio, like the power of the voice, like all that stuff kind of was instilled in me in my days in radio. And then eventually, like I only did a very brief stint in radio, but the thing that it paid terribly, and I thought to myself, well, surely I can make more money just doing something. So I bought a microphone, and I thought I'd start a copywriting agency, and maybe do some voiceover stuff on the side. And the copywriting was a abysmal failure, but the voiceover work picked up, and it ended up evolving into an agency specializing in voices for e-learning. And then in 2012, I kind of had been running this business for a few years, and it wasn't really bringing me purpose and meaning, and it was paying the bills, and it was enjoyable. It was easy enough, but it just wasn't like I wasn't changing the world, and I had this real desire to have an impact. And so I tried a few different things. I started an online magazine. I ran workshops, doing like personal development stuff. I blogged a lot. And then in 2012, I went on a retreat and came up with this idea of co-working. And so put every cent I had and some more into opening a co-working space, having done no research whatsoever, just like a build it and they will come kind of mentality, and opened the doors. And a year later, and $100,000 down the drain, I closed the doors, and I was at probably the lowest point of my entire life. I considered taking my own life. And so that is actually the beginning of the story. So, from there, I closed the co-working space. I fell pregnant that very weekend that I found someone to sublet the space, and the first year of motherhood, I was just in a depression, really, and it wasn't the first time I'd experienced depression. I'd had a few bouts throughout my lifetime. And I was still licking the wounds of this failure that I'd had. And I decided that, I've always wanted to have my own radio show, but I hated the music that I'd have to play. Wasn't really into Matchbox 20 or anything like that. And I was limited in what I could talk about, and it wasn't really meaningful stuff. It was like, some random story about a dog on a surfboard, and it wasn't really that great. So, and I'd heard of podcasting, and I'd always wanted to start one, but I didn't really know how, like technically, like what was involved in I knew how to do the sound part, obviously, and how to use my voice. And I'd been blogging for a while, so I knew how to tell a good story. And I just kind of, I found someone to help me with the bits that I didn't know. And I launched Carlosophies. And that's really where things started to shift for me. I started Carlosophies because I wanted to talk to other people about their failure. And it sounds a bit depressing, but I knew that this overnight success picture that's painted a lot in the online space wasn't real. And that people had, there was a long, often many, many decades of life before they hit overnight success. What happened in the rest of that story, And so Carlosophies really started to explore that, and it went to number 1 and was picked up by New and Noteworthy, and eventually people started coming to me asking me if I could teach them to podcast. So I created a podcasting school called Radcasters, which initially went well, and then kind of, it's had a lot of iterations over the years. And I've done a lot of coaching and masterminds and all kinds of stuff since. So so I guess that's like the cliff notes of my working career.
It's like you could, but there's a very important word that I heard when you were talking about how you were doing the voiceover work, when you were beginning your own agency, when you were talking about how things evolved. I think that's the key, and that really ties. What I'm hearing is that it ties all the threads together, and this is probably one of the most important messages that we have to hear: is that no one wakes up one morning with all their ducks in a row. Okay,
100%.
my idea. It's perfect. My hair's coiffed. I've got a great outfit on, and I'm going out there to greet the masses because I've got it all together. It just doesn't happen that way, which is why I love the concept of philosophies that you brought in. You know, actually normalizing failure, inverted commas. I mean, I've failed hundreds of times. I've got so many things that have not worked. But that's part of the process when it comes to iterating and defining and expanding what a next chapter is for you. Can you talk a little bit about that concept of the way that you see doubt as being a part of the process? Because I reckon we're really aligned here.
Yeah, so for me, I've done a lot on recognizing my own creative process over the years, and I definitely, bring it into the work that I do in the world, because what I find is, like, so many people get to that point of their creative cycle where they've had the idea, they've had the inspiration, they're all ready to go. You know, they start out at the gate, and then doubt hits, and that often, well, it depends. Like, it can be lots of different things, but say we're talking about launching something new. You've had this idea, you're all inspired, you go about creating it, you start offering out into the world, and then you hit this doubt period where you start doubting yourself, you start questioning what you're doing. I often find at this phase, I wonder if there would be a day job out there for me. So and I find it happens. Like, it's just a natural part of the process. Every time I launch, I come up to this point where it's like, oh my God, maybe it would be easier if I just got a job, and is anyone ever gonna, like, I don't know. The doubt is just a natural part. And when I look at other areas of my life where I create, it's not just in a launch, right? Like, one of the things that I would do on my retreats is, like, getting to know your creative process by creating something. So we've done it through basket weaving at a retreat, and we all sat down. And, basically the intention of the exercise of basket weaving isn't necessarily to weave a perfect basket. It's to witness yourself in creation and notice what comes up as you're creating. And what I found personally was I start off kind of like, oh, what's going on here? Like, oh, how does this work? And then I find a flow, and then it all kind of comes apart right before it comes back together. There's this period of, like, in a like, I kind of think of it like a caterpillar in a cocoon, in that metamorphosis that you turn to mush. It's like everything kind of disintegrates, and you're like, oh my God, how is this ever going to come back together? And then voila, it does, and I feel like using any creative exercise to show you your creative process, for me, it's been freedom, because now I can see that this is, it's okay, I'm just hitting up against this part of the process. Oh, it's okay, now I'm just hitting up against that part where I'm questioning if why I'm even doing this. And everyone's is slightly different. So that's the fascinating thing about this kind of work is, you have those type A people who get everything perfect, and then they want to go and show everyone else how to do it properly, and you have those people who are like, oh, this is bullshit. Like, why am I even doing this? Like, everyone has their own way that they start this process, but generally there is a point in the process for everyone where they come up against doubt. I've never met anyone who just smooth sails through every creation that they do. And for me, I believe that, as you create one thing is how you create all things. So it doesn't matter whether you're creating a meal in a kitchen, you're creating a painting or some pottery, or, or an offering, or you're moving through a launch, anything that you're creating, and even birth, birth has a process that, people talk about reaching that point where they're like, oh my God, I can't go on, I can't do this. And then there's the doctor, and he's saying, you're crowning, like, we all meet up against that moment in a creative cycle where doubt just becomes all-consuming. And once we have awareness around that, we can kind of sidestep it a little bit and just be like, Liz Gilbert has that whole thing about like fear sitting in the front seat of the car and
it's not allowed to take the wheel. Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like that. You can just you become more of a witness to the doubt rather than it consuming you, and running riot.
Absolutely. What I'm hearing there is very much about moving into being very connected to your self-worth, because when you have that connection to your own self-worth, self-trust is a big part of it. So being that observer rather than being, as you're saying, observing, witnessing rather than being consumed.
Yeah.
You've got that ability. This is where your self-awareness has lifted to a level where you can see what is going on and you can reassure yourself it's okay. It's okay. And in fact, that this very experience, I've had 2 examples of it just today, literally just today. So I love the way that you've brought this up for me. The next chapter, Cycle of Change, it has those steps. It has, the feeling of discontent. I've got to change something, into desire. What's it going to be? Into making the decision, into designing the new thing, into delivering it to the world. But in the center, doubt. It's like it's there at every single stage. And so this morning I had an email from a client I worked with a couple of weeks ago who has this brilliant idea. It's fantastic. And we got together on a strategy day and we put all the pieces in place. We expanded it. We gave it a container, a feeling. And she walked out of my home 3 foot up in the air. Today, the email came through, I'm not really sure this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to work.
So common. Common.
It is. I actually gave it a name. I call it the kadonk factor, right? So you're high as a kite, I'm so excited. This is the thing. I feel really aligned. I'm on purpose. I'm going to change the world, to whatever extent that means. And then a few days later, kadonk. Yeah. You get hit with reality. And it's knowing yourself and being able to sit with that and to really go inside and listen for what's true for you and to recognize, as you've described so beautifully, that this is normal. It's okay. You're going to feel some doubt. So that was example number 1. And for me, example number 2 was my book came back today from editing, from the first round of edits. And of course, there's been some constructive feedback. And I was I've been surfing a wave of excitement of hitting this big, hairy, audacious goal of actually getting the sucker back, out there. And then it's come back and it's oh, does this mean it's not any good? Does this mean maybe I should just change the whole thing? Maybe, and that was where I was last night.
Maybe I shouldn't even be an author.
Maybe I shouldn't be an author.
Who am I to write a book anyway?
all of that stuff. And so much like you then, what I can recognize though, this is what I call the bounceability factor. So you can fall down. That's okay. You're human. Okay, so your first reaction may be you hit the doubt because that's going to happen. But it's then your ability to actually reassure yourself, as we were talking about, and bring yourself back up. So this morning I'm okay, I am an author. This book does need to be in the world. Yes, of course, I hired an editor so that I could actually make sure the best possible version goes out. As you said, getting someone to help who can, when you didn't know, what are the ins and outs of the technicalities of podcasting, that didn't stop you from saying, I'm going to share my voice. I'm going to share this message. This is really important. You just closed those gaps. And I think that's what we really need. Anyone who's listening to this conversation needs to know that there is a difference between closing a technical, practical gap versus closing that potential and that possibility and your ideas. Big difference between the two.
Right. And so many people hit up against that doubt phase and just that's the end of it. Right? So nothing ever comes to fruition. There actually isn't a creation unless you see the thing through.
Yep.
And I find so many people get stuck in that doubt phase and they turn back, and no one can be impacted by your art, whatever that is. I'm not necessarily talking about art, but whatever it is, your podcast, your blog, your business offering, whatever it is, no one will ever be impacted from it while it's inside of you. I have this thing, so many people come to me and they're I want a podcast. I want to share my truth with the world, and then they're but it feels self-indulgent. And I find it always hilarious that they come to me that's all I do. I just speak my truth. And I'm like, but do you see me as self-indulgent? And they're like, well, no, you impact, you change people's lives. And it's like, yeah, because I don't allow myself, I don't indulge in stories of self-indulgence, right? Like that's actually more self-indulgent than just allowing yourself to indulge,
I hope you're enjoying this conversation and perhaps it's inspiring you to start your own next chapter. Don't forget to pop over to my website where you can order a copy of my book, Your Next Chapter, Ditch Your Doubt, Own Your Worth and Build the Business You Really Want. In it, I'll take you through the next chapter change cycle that will help you develop the clarity and confidence to move into this next stage of your business and life. Just go to angelarasmus.com/Your Next Chapter book. It makes me think of, the Marianne Williamson quote that talks about, who am I to think that I can? And she says, well, who are you not?
Right.
You think of every individual who has had an impact on your life. Like if those people had kept their mouths closed, then where might we be? That's actually one point that I make in the book is my life was changed by hearing somebody else's story. And it has been changed in many ways, but there was an incredibly pivotal point when I moved into sobriety almost 14 years ago now, because there was a woman standing up in front of me at the rehabilitation center that I was in telling her story, and I woke up when I heard her story because I heard myself in it. I heard where I was, but more importantly, I heard where I could be. Now, what if that woman had decided, I'm not ready enough, my story's not exciting enough, I'm not going to tell it, where might I be? Now, I don't want to get all dramatic, but, we need to share this story so that other people can find those little catalyst moments that take us forward. So who are you not to understand that what you have to share could be just what someone needs? Right. I know that sounds very kumbaya-ish.
No, but it's
also true.
Yeah. It's totally true. And, and if you think about it, it's actually incredibly selfish for you to keep your brilliance to yourself. If we can get out of our own way, then we can have the impact that we desire. I think part of the problem is that a lot of us, I hear all the time, if I could just impact one person, that would be amazing. And then 3 weeks later, so I'm getting 70 downloads per episode. I don't think that's very good. Maybe it's not really worth my time. It's like, hang on a second. You just told me if you impacted one person, that would be enough. And now you're telling me that 70 people is not enough for you, and so we often will look at those external factors of success and also allow that to be a catalyst for doubt, and a catalyst for us questioning our worthiness of our story. But, for me, it's been, I've been blogging or speaking my truth now since, on a public platform since 2009. And I'm still not freaking Brené Brown or, Liz Gilbert. I don't have that level of fame, but I also have come to a place within myself that's not really the indication of success for me anymore. The indication of success is a lot more internal than it is, dictated by external factors.
That part is so important, isn't it? We might not be able to have the clear vision of where our business is going to evolve to. I mean, that's just not possible. You can't steer a parked car. You need to be in motion. You're just going to be moving in the direction of what is pulling you, what is calling you, and then pieces reveal themselves along the way. Again, I'm not being totally woo. I like this balance, grounded woo, because we have to trust, but we have to take action to actually give that trust legs. So you've got that going on, but at the end of the day, you don't know who you're going to impact along the way. And if we then, as you're saying, take on those external measures of this is what success should look like, you've got to connect internally and work out what does it mean to you, what's important to you. I know I used to lust after other people's success. I'd look at it and go, oh my God, why can't I be doing that? And then I've learned to give myself a little bit of a pause, the power of the pause, and go, hang on a minute. Do you actually want that? And what does her life or his life look like on the other side? All I'm seeing is the tip of the iceberg. Am I prepared to do the things that need to be done to achieve that? And the answer is no.
Yeah, 100%. I have two questions that I ask myself all the time if I am ever triggered in that way. And one is, what am I available for? You know, like, because often what like you said, what we're seeing is the tip of an iceberg. We're just seeing like a tiny little part of a big life. And to be honest, if I think about the things that I thought I wanted, mass fame, you know, etc., you know, endless wealth, you know, all of this kind of stuff. Number one, am I available for it? Well, you know, I don't really want to be that level of famous. I don't think I'd really enjoy that. Being looked at all of the time isn't necessarily, I'm not necessarily available for that. And also, you know, I'd see these people traveling the world and speaking on stages overseas and all this kind of jazz. And I'd be like, oh, I want that. And then I'd ask myself, am I available for it? Well, not really, because I actually really dig my home and being with my family. So no, like, you know, I'm definitely available for a trip to the States to speak once a year or something, but more than that, I'm not really that available for, you know. And so often we're looking around and basing our what we think our reality should look like on what we're seeing, but when we check in, it's not actually something that's aligned to us. And often what I do is ask myself, what is it that I'm actually after here? Because it's not necessarily the yacht, you know, like what is the feeling that I think the yacht is going to bring me, and what is available to me now to have that feel, rather than, you know, waiting for it.
I love that discernment there. Discernment is such an important skill for us to develop, so that if that's the feeling that I'm looking for, what could I experience today here in my reality that could deliver that similar feeling?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that idea of, okay, so what's going to happen now? And to actually make that choice, give yourself the power to create that.
Yeah, because those feels are available to us at all times. They're not reliant. And so those two questions of like, what am I available for and what is available to me are like game changers for me. Anytime I feel like I'm falling into that kind of life is happening to me, it's not fair, why isn't this happening for me? You know, I just come back to those questions. What am I available for and what is available to me?
Yeah, no, they're really important ones. And I think we also are aware that there's different stages of life. Like in the book, I talk very much about in your 40s and beyond, because it feels to me that we have this gathering, this maelstrom of experience and personal insight that tends to start to peak. But I'm not saying that it can't happen earlier. I mean, I certainly know my first chapter began at 33 when I went, you know what? Not going back to corporate, going to give this a go myself. My next chapter happened at 37, you know, when I got sober, and then 42 when I changed my business model. And there's more happening all the time. So what are we available for and what's available to me will change at different stages.
Right, because when I was 40 and had a 3-year-old, I absolutely was not available for a lot of the things.
Yeah.
And now as she's in school, I'm becoming more available for, you know, for things. I have more space. So yeah, and you're so right. We do just, like, our personal circumstances change, and what we are available for and what is available to us changes as we move through life and as we as we evolve.
So it's almost like there's recalibration points where if we can check in with ourselves at each stage, okay, so things are opening up. Like my daughter is sitting HSC in a few weeks, and I'm seeing she's got her license now. My son's down in Canberra at uni. Like, the world is changing. And so what is available for me, I have more choice now that is opening up. And that choice, really, when we have to start looking at that second stage of the change cycle, which is desire. Well, what do you really want? What do you really want? And I think our values become really important here. One of the other women who I've interviewed on this series talks about sovereignty as being one of the values that has come to the surface for her. It used to be service. and it still is service rather, but sovereignty has joined the pack. And her definition of that was very much of looking inside, what honors me? And it's like, yeah, I talk about it, pushing yourself back up the priority totem pole so that you're at least first equal with everybody else in your world. But once you get to these recalibration points and recognize that there are more options to you if you let go of those old stories that told you what's not possible, and let's instead start looking at the new story about what is becoming possible. That feels really juicy and exciting.
It's so true, because we're not all on it's not an even playing field, like we're actually all playing on different playing fields with different sets of goals, and and those goals are set at different distances. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're looking around us, is that it's not an even playing field, but we get to choose the playing field in which we play. So, and sometimes you're watching someone and you're thinking that's what I want, but they're actually playing soccer and you hate soccer. So,
yes.
so I feel like, and also we can, this is something that, one of my, partners in business, Callie, she says, you move the goalposts. Like you can set the goalpost there, but they're movable. And I think that's, something that, from my own personal journey and, just thinking back on all the different things I've done and that evolution, it's like, we can't, I don't know, like having rigid ideas of where we want to go and expectations doesn't necessarily work for me. And I know it doesn't work for a lot of people. For some people, having those like far out goals really works because it's motivating, and for others it's deflating. So I guess like we're not only just playing different different fields, are also playing different sports, and we all play differently. So so we get to choose what, how movable things are. And for me, being able to pivot and adjust and change is actually really important. It's part of my nature to experiment and try things out. And I don't think people give themselves enough permission just to do that. They get a rigid idea of where they're heading, and they become really dog-eared, is that the word, in their determination to get there. And sometimes that closes you off to the opportunities that exist in the moment.
I think it's with listening to that line of thought, there's an expression that I've often used, which is glass blinkers. Like you need to have your blinkers on so that you can stay focused on your path, your goals, your direction. But they need to be glass, because if we want to be able to see other possibilities. And I think if we're just wearing like, this is it, and like, you can't see me because we haven't got video on, but I'm like, this is it, looking down, and this is no other way. But the glass allows us to go, hey, whoa, maybe I need to consider that. When we've got that discernment, we can start to say, okay, that's a distraction as opposed to a possibility. But if we've got the full blinkers on, we don't even notice what could be possible. Expectations are really dangerous. I want to hold my desires and my goals quite lightly.
Yes, 100%. I always say a closed fist can't grasp a gift. So, you have to have your hand open in order to have the gift. If you're all like rigid and tight, there's no flow or movement in that. And so the palm has to be open to grab a gift. It can't be in a fist.
Absolutely. My God, if we went back and actually downloaded all of our quotes, we've just come up with a whole category of them here. But so there's a concept which I talk about in the book and in my business as a whole, where a next chapter, the business as the concept, needs to have contribution, fulfillment, and financial reward in equal measures. We need that blend for it to tick the boxes. How does that combination play out for you?
So it was contribution, financial reward, and what was the third one?
The one is fulfillment. So contribution, fulfillment, financial reward.
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like it definitely, those things, having had a business that has been financially successful, not necessarily fulfilling, or has a sense of contribution. It's, it's nice to be paying the bills, but it's not enough. And I find a lot of people get to that point, right? Like, I mean, that's why this space of online entrepreneurship has exploded, is that people are making money doing jobs that they don't necessarily feel are contributing to society, and they don't necessarily feel fulfillment. So the money's nice, but they're seeking something, right? Yeah. And that's all. I feel like that's almost a pandemic, to be honest. You know, that seeking purpose, seeking meaning. It's almost like hunting it down. What is it? What is it? What is it? And I've been in that place. It's not necessarily a very fun place to be. Because also I find the place of seeking is not the place of finding too. So when we're really looking for something, we're close. Like, yeah, we become kind of narrow. We have that narrow vision, like the glass blinders. We put the blinders on. We can't see the other opportunities that are right in front of us. Because that I think that's the most fascinating part about having been on my own, you know, I guess, hero's journey when it comes to finding purpose, is that it's often so simple, you know, and we're so overcomplicating it because we're thinking it needs to be more and more and more, you know, like more than who we are, the nature of who we are. When we find it, and in terms of finding it, I think it's also always an evolution as well. But when we start to come from this place where we're feeling fulfilled and we're feeling like we're contributing, then I lost my train of thought.
No, that's okay. It's there. It's like, I think the point that you were making, which ties it all together, is our tendency to overcomplicate it.
Right.
And that combination for you, what is contribution, what is fulfillment, what is financial reward, what is enough, looks like for you is going to be different from somebody else. And that's absolutely as it should be.
100%. And, you know, and we do try to overcomplicate it, because what I find is that most people, when they find that they've had this sense of contribution, when they find that they're feeling fulfilled, and they're like, oh, I didn't know it was going to be this simple.
Yeah.
No? So for me, it's definitely been just this natural evolution. It has been something that I've forced at times, and when I've tried to force it, it hasn't really worked. But when I've just kind of allowed myself to check in constantly and give myself permission to be more and more who I am, then the other bits kind of fall into place naturally. The sense of contribution is there because I'm not holding myself back. I'm not censoring myself to try and please others. And when I do that, when I stop censoring myself, I actually have a greater impact. When I'm being completely myself, that's when I impact people. And that's fulfilling in itself. Living life as yourself is very fulfilling. And then the financial aspect, for me, I just have found it kind of works itself out too. You know, you've still got to obviously put yourself out there and make yourself available. But it's less of a battle for me these days.
Yeah. I think there was a great quote from your dad when one of the questions that I asked you was, where is it? The best piece of advice I've ever been given: do what you love and the money will follow.
Yeah.
The money will follow. And as we were talking about before, we need to, like, there's the inspirational side, then there's the practical side. So we don't just sit there and manifest it into our laps. There's actions we have to take. But it is far easier to get through the ups and downs and the challenges that are, like, always associated with that evolution of a business over time, if we're doing something that is what we love, is what is important to us, is what calls us, is what we're outraged about and we want to fix, or we've always held inside and we want to talk about. I really loved when we talked about just a couple of minutes ago, we overcomplicate it too much. We think that purpose is more than the nature of who we are. Yeah. I think you encapsulated that perfectly, that simplicity of who you are and how you want to show up in the world, valuing your experiences and your insights and recognizing that people will benefit from what it is that you have. Not everybody. That's okay. You don't have to convince and convert everybody. You just need to look after your people. You just need to share your message in your way, which you do so beautifully.
And I feel like there's this, in terms of business and in terms of the kind of work that you and I do in the world, you know, there is this, expectation of having a big following. And a lot of people see that as like a barrier. My following isn't big enough. That's why I'm not, like I'm not as big as I thought I would be or whatever. But for me personally, I don't have a massive following, but I do have a successful business. So, and that's really come from, for me, and I feel like this is true for anything really, is like, it's about relationship, it's about the relationship that we have with the people around us, and that I am deeply committed to. So, so there's this, like, I don't know, magical